Welcome to the December 2nd, 2021 meeting of the Riverfront Design Committee. My name is John Postick and I'm the chair of the committee. The following guidelines are in place for meetings in the council chamber at City Hall. Only the south entrance to City Hall will be open for access to the building. For exiting the building, all accesses can be used. Air purifying machines have been installed in the chamber. Hand sanitizer machines and disposable face masks will be available. When called on, applicants and speakers will come to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Speak into the microphone, please, and identify yourself and provide your address for the record when you begin speaking. Address your comments to the committee. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. Citizens may address the committee on agenda items by responding to the chair's call for speakers during discussion on each item and signing the speaker's log on the podium. All comments must be relevant to the item. The chair or presiding officer may, in his or her discretion, prohibit a person from addressing the committee and/or remove that person from the council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please see the agenda for more information about these requirements. If you parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex Elementary School, staff can provide a parking validation ticket to you. The agenda and documents are located at https://okc.primegov.com/public/portal. You would then select the Riverfront Design Committee meeting, then click on an agenda item, and the relevant documents will come up below the item. I would like to welcome a new committee member today, Erica Herrera. Debbie, will you please call the roll?
Committee Member Postick.
Present.
Committee Member Husel.
Present.
Committee Member Dean.
Present.
Committee Member Doherty. Committee Member Howard. Committee Member Larson. Committee Member Montoya.
Present.
Committee Member Templeton.
Present.
Committee Member Herrera. Chairman, we have quorum.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, approval of minutes from the October 4th, 2021 regular meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Dana Templeton. I approve the minutes from meeting October 4th, 2021.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Moved by Templeton, seconded by Heisel.
Oh, shoot. Sorry. I beat her to it.
And we'll need to, and I believe Committee Member Herrera was going to abstain on the minutes because she wasn't present for that meeting.
I apologize, I didn't see the results. I assume the motion passed? Thank you.
We need to display that.
Debbie, would you mind displaying the results? For the record of our meeting.
I don't know that there is a way to go back to show them. Is it acceptable if she reads them off?
Yeah, or we could do a roll call. vote.
Yeah, it just might be quicker for her to just, yeah.
Debbie, would you mind reading off the results of the votes, please?
Herrera abstain. Postick, yay. Husel, yay. Dean, yay. Montoya, yay. Templeton, yay.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3, cases withdrawn. There are none. Agenda item number 4, continuance requests. Item 4A, PC-10767 at 3617 through 3625 Southwest 12th Street and 3630 Southwest 11th Street. Katie, can you update us?
Yes, so this is a request for a recommendation to Planning Commission on a rezoning case. The committee heard this in October and actually continued it at the request of the applicant in October to this meeting. They have asked for an indefinite continuance. They're considering alternatives to the way in which they're rezoning the property, so they will be back before this body when they're ready to proceed with Planning Commission. So they've asked for, and I'll let Laura weigh in if there are other details that we need to know, but just an indefinite continuance, not a continuance to a date specific. And because this isn't a certificate of approval, we don't have to continue it to a specific meeting date, is my understanding.
Okay. Laura, anything to add?
No.
Okay. Due to a request from the applicant, I would entertain a motion for an indefinite continuance for this agenda item.
Dana Templeton, I will make a motion that we
accept the motion to approve the indefinite continuance.
Is there a second?
Montoya, a second.
Thank you.
Yes, so we'll do a voice vote for Committee Member Herrera.
Yay for Herrera.
Thank you. The motion passes. Agenda item number 5, consent docket. We have one item on the consent docket. Would anyone like to pull it for discussion? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent docket. Anyone?
Templeton would like to make a motion to approve the consent docket.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Montoya, second.
This is Erica Herrera. Yay.
Thank you. The motion passes. Item number 6, cases for individual consideration. There are none. Item number 7, other business. Item 7A, PUD-01867 at 659 First Americans Boulevard. Katie, can you tell us a little bit?
Yes, so this is located in the American Indian Cultural Center District. Consideration and possible action on application by Mark Zitzow, Johnson & Associates for AICCM Land Development LLC to provide a recommendation to Planning Commission regarding a request to rezone from R1 Single Family Residential District and I3 Heavy Industrial District to a planned unit development that would be developed in accordance with modified C3 Community Commercial District regulations in removal of the 121-acre property from the Scenic River Overlay Design District. The committee has seen this area of the district quite a bit recently. We've recently reviewed the PUD for the museum itself and variants for signage associated with the First Americans Museum. This PUD is for the property encircling the museum itself, so it does not include the First Americans Museum and is intended to facilitate a large development project in that area. The applicants do have a presentation, so I'll let them go through the details of what that proposed development involves. Staff, you all may have noted you got a longer than typical staff report from us because we wanted to incorporate a lot of the details of what in the Scenic River Overlay Design District was not being incorporated into the PUD. Staff recommended approval with conditions to address the things that had been eliminated in the PUD. Most notably is simply the removal from the Design Review District, which would eliminate both provisions of the Design Review District guidelines and regulations that currently would be applicable to development at the site, and also eliminates the design review process and the oversight by this body and by staff. Some of the main areas that staff had concerns about were the lack of architectural regulations and guidelines, which of course the overlay goes into great detail about those types of features for building materials, site development, setbacks, massing, articulation, interactivity with the pedestrian realm, parking regulations and guidelines. There were concerns that there weren't adequate requirements there for ensuring compatibility of new parking facilities, both surface parking and structured parking with surrounding developments and with the river. Specifically, Scenic River has guidelines about minimizing the visual prominence of parking, dividing up surface parking lots into smaller lots separated by landscape islands, and then design criteria specifically for parking garages that did not appear to be addressed. Landscaping and screening regulations. The PUD has incorporated some of the portions of our landscaping regulations, and we just felt those were very important to be upheld in this development. Fencing and walls regulations. The PUD addresses perimeter fencing but does not appear to address other fencing requirements within the site. Regulations for signage were not consistent with what would be allowed in Scenic River, and appeared to allow for a larger amount of signage with no restrictions on placement, minimal limitations on the use of large projection screens. And then our other main concern was connection to the trail system and making sure that that was more thoroughly detailed in the PUD, how that would interact with the site. As I said, we have, so this is for our new member, or anyone who's not as familiar with this process. This is a recommendation, it's not a certificate of approval. So our recommendation will be forwarded on to the Planning Commission. And the recommendation can include any amount of detail that the committee wants to provide about things, provisions of the PUD that the committee supports or doesn't support or thinks should be revised. You all can provide direction to the Planning Commission on how those revisions, specific things that this committee thinks should be addressed. And the other thing that I'll say is that your comments, your findings, your conditions on your recommendation to Planning Commission are different from a condition on a certificate of approval. When we're approving a certificate of approval with conditions, the applicant has to agree to those conditions. In this case, because this is your recommendation to another body, we don't have to come to an agreement with the applicant. Obviously, that would be nice to all be on the same page and understand each other. But if there's something that this committee feels is important to convey to Planning Commission, you are free to do so, even if the applicant still says, we don't agree with that. So I'm happy to try to answer additional questions you all may have about the project or the staff report, but I think the applicant's prepared to present theirs. Let me actually, we're kind of multitasking here with some folks out today, so let me pull up the presentation. Oh, we've got this up, so let me, yes.
I need to go ahead and make a statement. My name is Dana Templeton. I am employed with a firm that does quite a bit of work with the Chickasaw Nation. And even though it's not been determined whether my firm will or will not ever work on this project, I feel it's best if I recuse myself from this.
Thank you.
So just quickly to go through our actual PowerPoint, as we always do, you can see here where the site is located, and we've kind of grayed out the First Americans PUD that was done separately. Another aerial view of the site, and kind of some surrounding views from the surrounding streets as you're approaching First Americans. And I will confess that we copied these slides over from a previous presentation about First Americans, so you're seeing the same things that you've seen several times before in these meetings. So I'm going to pull up the applicant's presentation. If you all would like to approach, and if the committee has any additional questions for staff or for the applicant.
Thank you, Katie.
Are you going to be operating slide change?
Yeah, if you don't mind, just because we have, okay. Yep, just let me know.
Thank you. Tim Johnson and Mark Zitzow here. We are with Johnson Associates, 1 East Sheridan, Suite 200, Oklahoma City, and we are here on behalf of the applicant for this project. Just a couple of introduction remarks that I'd like to make, and then Mark's going to go through the heart of the presentation. First of all, I'm going to apologize for the length of this presentation because there's a lot of material we want to provide, and we think it's very important because we've been working on this for 2 years. It only went public back in summer, July, and since it's gone public, we were, actually before it went public, we had conversations with City Council and the Mayor's Office and the City Manager advising the city that this was coming forward. So, and I was present in all those meetings. But as Katie had pointed out a little bit, and I'll reiterate, is when the Scenic River Overlay design was adopted in 2007, the museum itself was in a hiatus. It had started construction, didn't get completed, and it wasn't until the Chickasaw Nation and other donors stepped up to ensure that the museum would be completed. And that work was done, took about 2 years. And as everybody knows, it was recently opened. So, I think that's an important fact to understand. And in the staff report as well, in the background, it talks about the portion of the Scenic River Overlay that talks about what this property should do, and that it should provide, was used solely for the commercial development, operation, and improvements complementary to the American Cultural Center, or First American Museum. And I think what you'll see in our presentation is that's exactly what this is. So if you can go on. So as I mentioned, the Chickasaws purchased the property. They rebranded it the First American Museum. First American Museum opened. The new development was announced in July. Next slide. So what has happened so far is, and I make this point simply because it may look on the surface like we're trying to skirt out of Scenic River Overlay, but I guarantee you I have not had this much conversation on any project with the city. We have talked with all these departments so far. We have submitted a traffic impact study to Public Works. We haven't got any comments back yet. And as we go into the plans, you'll see this project is very far along. So during the COVID year of hiatus, the architects that are driving this were continuing working on the plans. Us lowly civil guys, we didn't get to start anything until July. So we're playing catch up, and our infrastructure design is about 65% complete. So the project has got some energy behind it. They've spent some money to really get it to the point that they understand what they're going to bring to the market so that they can regulate that with the end users that they've got on the hook. So we've met with the utilities department. This particular project is fed by a very large siphon that goes under the river, which dictates how deep we can make our sanitary sewer. The museum itself is on a lift station because it couldn't get into the public sanitary sewer. So we're extending an 18-inch main to serve our project, and we have raised the finished floor of our projects to allow it to be served well above the 100-year. Other impacts on the property that would be detrimental in any other condition. We had 254 oil and gas easements on the site. We're in the process of eliminating those. As of today, we got about half of them signed off. About 30 of them are unassigned, and they will probably go away. We're down to 5 different users, and you can see the red lines on there. So our design works completely around all these pipelines. And we've worked intimately with these pipeline companies. We've exposed and excavated. ONG has been a great partner in this project because we are not only butting up against their easement, we're bridging their easement twice. And they have approved all of that. Next slide. So on the site, you can see that the shaded, the grayed area is the existing museum facility. It's served by a lift station that says, the little square box on the bottom, it says not included in the PUD. That's the housing for the lift station that serves them only, and it was only designed for the museum. The east half of this site and most of the west half of this site is in the 100-year floodplain. So we are raising, we'll be bringing in a ton of dirt to raise this site well above the 100-year, in some areas 10 feet above the 100-year. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the museum itself is on a pedestal, It's 12 feet above the 100-year, and so we'll be relocating the existing drive that serves it today. We'll be bringing a new street, Mark will show this in a little more detail, around to the south, and then feeding the FAM, or the museum, through a separate public street. We've met with Embark about public transit, which was a very important aspect of Councilman Nice's concern about this. Her concern was getting workforce people to get to the site. At the end of the day, there'll be 400 workforce employees serving this. Next slide. And then I wanted to point out that the First American Museum, as well as the leadership of the Chickasaws that we have been working with and the development team, they've been in communication. They're not going to be left behind. They've been involved every step of this process. And then next slide. So with this, I'm going to let Mark go into the design of the PUD.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Zidzow with Johnson & Associates, 1 East Sheridan Avenue. A couple, I guess 2 quick points that were on our previous slide. We've also been working in partnership with the Parks Department and the Maps Department in regard to the trail that will be placed along the river and new bike lanes that will go over the bridge and where that trail will cross over. So I think to Tim's point, we have been working with all departments, including planning and development services, on this PUD for an extensive period of time. And this is not, as Tim was alluding to, this was not a way or an intent to cut the city out. This has mostly to do with the timing of the process of Scenic River. And so I'm going to walk through the project and then we'll kind of touch base on that again. So Tim mentioned this site has been under design for the last 2 years, and we've been involved with most of that. The major focal point of this project is the First Americans Museum. So this has been purposefully designed in conjunction with that museum to enhance it and note its prominence on the site. There's been respect paid to the equinox and summer solstice, which was part of the original master plan for the project. So there are pieces of that that have been carried through onto this plan. We are activating the riverfront with new trails, connections, and entry points from our buildings. I think you'll see this in the renderings. We're not viewing any side of this building as a rear. There is no backside. Everything has treatment that's opening out to the river and internal. By its nature, it is somewhat of an insular property similar to the Boathouse District. It is essentially a resort that will be inward facing, but in no way does that mean that the river is not getting the treatment that's deserved for a project of this caliber. And you'll see that through the heavy landscaping and artwork, both murals and interactive artwork that's going to be placed throughout the property. Ultimately, the goal here is a high level of interaction between the site, the river, and its guests. And again, we'll note that through some of the uses and the activation that's occurring on the site. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'll quickly walk through the site plan. From a high-level standpoint, there are 2 pieces of this property that are not included in this PUD. Katie mentioned the First Americans Museum and its associated property in the middle. And then Tim mentioned the lift station on the south side that is not included in our PUD. So there's a small little piece in kind of the center south that is excluded. Oop, you can go back. On the right, you'll see a color that's a little bit brighter than the rest. That is our phase 1 and our phase 2. That is everything you'll be seeing today. Within the PUD, there is a special requirement for what's called the future phase to come back for a specific site plan approval through the Planning Commission, given that that piece is a very highly conceptual design right now. Everything that we've been working on to this point is everything on the east side of the museum. So I will start kind of clockwise. I don't have access to the mouse, do I?
No, sorry.
So if you look, if you hover over the white building on the right, just south, yes, that's the water park. It's an indoor water park with slides that will exit the building and bring you back in. I'm going to kind of move clockwise. There is what will be a surface parking lot that's likely a temporary use that will be redeveloped down the road. There's the new street that is coming in off of Eastern that is going to loop around what's the backside of the development, bringing you in and around. It'll act almost like a ring road, but it will loop you through Phase 1 and around Phase 2 to bring you into the entrance of First Americans Museum. And then we'll take you north into what will be the drop-off and turnaround for a future public transportation link. So that will be, if you went further north into the hotel, that will circle you around. So in the center, you've got the lagoon, potential splash pads, more water features, cabanas, and essentially a resort amenity. The Phase 2 that's outlined, those are commercial buildings and a potential parking structure. Some of that is yet to be determined. The pink buildings are a combination of retail, restaurant, and commercial space that will have a dual level, one that opens up to the lagoon side and the other that will open up to the street side. And there's some renderings of the street and what that'll look like. The red building is the Native American Marketplace, which will feature artists from all of the tribes. To the immediate north is the main parking structure that will serve the development, as well as overflow parking for the museum and its events. There is a portion of that will be a surface parking lot that's located primarily behind the parking garage structure. And then on to the east of the parking garage, that is the O'Connor Hotel, in which the project is named after. It's 400 plus rooms, and that is connected to an interactive building with meeting room space and other interactive uses. Some have yet to be determined, but you'd see something similar to an arcade. And that building is then connected back to the water park. So in between the parking garage and the O'Connor Hotel, and then in between the hotel and the interactive meeting room space are two large pedestrian connections that take you back out to the river. We'll note you can see the trail along the north side of our property. We have worked with MAP specifically to ask that that trail be put on a slight hold and worked and incorporated into the design. A grant was received to add a Devon River Cruise drop-off. You can see that cutout on the river. So a grant's been received for that. And in working with MAPS, the trail will kind of be a switchback for a grade difference to work back into the trail. That trail will head east, back toward First American Boulevard, and the connection through First Americans Boulevard is being moved to a safer location to the north slightly for access. If you go to the next slide. Thank you. So this will better show the kind of pedestrian and cycle plan for the development. You can see that red better will essentially be the MAPS trail. The blue are all of our internal pedestrian sidewalks and walkways. And that it's a fairly interconnected development, and we've got those passages back out to the north side and the river. And then the red are entrances, or kind of those what would be the internal doors and entry points to the project. On this, because it's zoomed up, I apologize, Katie, you can see that the front door of the museum, there is that linear straight line back to the circle to the right in blue. An art feature will be there that represents that equinox and summer solstice piece of the project. Next slide. Thank you. So this is a rendering looking back toward downtown. You can see the First Americans Museum on the left side, and on the right side, the O'Connor Hotel. This is essentially looking from the water park, and so you could see the lagoon feature. It's a beach-style entry pool. And then on the left would be kind of those Phase 2 buildings. There's a plaza / amphitheater on the left-hand side that's leading you into the museum. And you can see the goal, and this is a rendering, but we're confident in what we're showing because of how far along we are in plans. There's a significant amount of landscaping that's going to be placed on this project. If you can go to the next slide. This is looking south from the river. You can see the Devon River Cruise drop-off on the right side, and then there's another plaza by what's the starting line tower for the boat races and kayaks and canoes. So there's a large open green space, connections back to the trail, and you can see, just in looking at these renderings, that the O'Connor Hotel, it's going to have openings and access points, and then those large pedestrian connections. The one piece I will note on this, the bridge that is shown is a funded bridge for the city. The location is yet to be determined. So you will likely, because it's crossing the river and extending outside of the PUD, that will come back to you. It's undetermined as to what part of the river that bridge will actually be on, so you will see that bridge in the future. Next slide. So this one is looking at the hotel and back toward the river. On the right, you have some of the commercial space, and this is that drop-off. It's been purposefully designed to accommodate fire access and public buses as the turnaround. As you kind of saw from the site, our frontage on First Americans Boulevard is somewhat limited, and it's our only access to the site. So this option as a turnaround presented the best use of the space and the property. Next slide. So in your packet, you had some 35 images and renderings. That's probably maybe an eighth of the amount of renderings and elevations that are out there. So I've just grabbed a few that I want to run through that's showing kind of the high-level design and architectural materials that are being used. Oklahoma is hot. I don't think that surprises anybody. So a portion of this project is being designed with more interesting and artistic canopies to shade some of these walkways and these plaza areas. If you can go to the next slide. Here's a picture of the parking garage. So this is the side of the parking garage with the surface parking lot that is facing away from the river. And you can see on this one there are berms on the right side that screen it back to the museum. But if you look at the parking garage, there is going to be architectural screening, but then there are large blank canvases that are going to feature native artists. And this is just on the parking garage. You'll find that on almost all of the buildings as we kind of move through this, but it will be heavily landscaped. And on the left, you can kind of see the top left, the angle in which we're showing you. This would be on the side away from the river. On the side facing the river, there's much more landscaping to shield the parking garage further. You can go to the next slide. Here's a plaza that's looking back toward the First Americans Museum. I think this shows that this project is still being built solely around that focal point and tying back in. And then you start to see the use of a lot of stone and earth materials that have been used and are represented in the First Americans Museum. Next slide. Here's a section of the street that's being proposed. You could see the retail is fronting. The signage in this area is minimal. There are sidewalks and landscaping and tree wells that will be placed throughout the project. Next slide. Here's another view. We're looking at material changes within the street and in the plazas to note pedestrian areas versus the vehicular areas. And again, you can see that use of stone and natural materials throughout the project. And again, the awnings that are providing some shade to provide comfort through all seasons. Go to the next slide. This is a second-story view looking back at the museum. So again, all of the buildings are trying to provide a perspective that are looking back toward the museum. Next slide. This would be the spa, golf simulator, and retail buildings. Again, there are large pieces of artwork that are going to be placed on the sides of these buildings, highlighting native artists. If you can go to the next slide. And I'll close with the images and the renderings with the sign package that is represented in this PUD. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of high visibility from this site, so we think signage is important. We're proposing 2 of the project identification signs that will be located at Eastern Avenue, similar to the variants that you've approved for the museum. But then there's a series of other signs that will be located throughout the district. This project is unique in that this whole tract is being developed by one entity. And the reason that's different is if you think about Bricktown or downtown, you're dealing with signs on a particular building on a particular site and how they're all interacting together. This is a project that is cohesively designing all of the signage and knows what its needs are, which are higher and different from that of a design district. So if you go to the next slide. So Tim mentioned Scenic River being adopted in 2007. The museum was on a bit of a break at that point. We're now at the point where we know exactly what's going to happen. The district in this area was established to help encourage this development to occur and provide its flexibility. If you go to the next slide. We believe that's what our PUD has done. We're at the point where we know exactly what we're doing on this first phase, and our PUD is written in such a way that gives us the flexibility we believe we need to accomplish this project in the timeline that's been provided. So this sub-district of the SRODD outlined that it should be built around the museum and uses that support the museum and provide a visual interest and establish an identity for the district and a sense of arrival. It's hard to imagine a project doing that any better than how it's being proposed and how the designs have been incorporated. So if you go to the next slide. So ultimately, to one last slide before I sum up, the PUD, we believe, is creatively designed. It's a master plan development of high quality appearance and long-lasting materials with a strong visual and physical connection to the river, which encourages outdoor activity. We believe that pretty well encapsulates the intent of the guidelines for this particular site. And while we're happy to continue to work with staff on particular regulations that need to go into the PUD, we believe that this PUD meets the intent of this sub-district. Next slide. So a quick recap. The intent here is to create a world-class resort and activity space centered around the world-class First Americans Museum. We believe that we've given the proper respect back to the museum and to the river with our proposed design. We believe this is going to create a new district and ultimately a major tourist destination for Oklahoma City. There's internal architectural oversight that is being provided to ensure compatibility with the First Americans Museum and our connections to the river. And we think that this is setting a precedent for this area. And I think the goal here we would begin to see some of the industrial uses start to transfer over to other ancillary uses, which all remain within the design district and not part of this project. So ultimately, we're asking for your recommendation to Planning Commission of approval of the PUD as presented, which does ask to remove it from the Scenic River overlay. So with that, we'd be happy to take any feedback and answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Can I add one thing? I apologize. So what came to mind on this, is, as Mark was presenting, is this isn't the first time we've done this. So in the Bricktown area, if you'll recall, the Lower Bricktown came into vogue way after the North Bricktown Canal was built. The canal was built, but if you took the boat ride, you'd get blown in the face with sand as you went south of Reno. So that piece of property was acquired by a local developer from the Urban Renewal Authority, and we wrote a PUD 22 years ago that did exactly what this is intending to do. And we developed through that PUD that entire tract. I don't think there's a bad building in there. Obviously, it's been a very popular result. And so even though that was 20 plus years ago, most of you guys were in school. Unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember that. And but I think it worked. I mean, my point being is it worked well, and we worked in really very cohesive with the north part of the canal. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you for hearing us.
Well, thank you both for the presentation. I'll just start by saying I think this is immensely exciting for the city. This board exists because the city made a tremendous investment in the river and established the Scenic River Overlay Design District to ensure that future development both maximized the return on the city's investment in the river and also guaranteed that future development would respect the surrounding adjacent property owners and development that's been put in by private entities. First question I have is, everything you said seems to be based on a statement that your PUD is in compliance with the regulations and guidelines of the SRODD. Why does this need to be removed from the SRODD?
I think our statement is that we're meeting the intent of the SRODD. Our belief as to why it needs to be removed, we can point mostly to timing of the project. As you can see, we're likely to come in with approximately 15 building permits between cabanas, pools, hotel. All of those under the current zoning and the current regulations all requires review, board approval. It's an extensive timeline for that. It's not even the initial upfront timing of that. Once that's approved on a project of this size, with the way construction materials are being sourced right now, every change ends up having to go back for an amendment. We're dealing with projects right now that are in for building permit review, and when things change, we have to go back through the process for an administrative amendment, which takes at a minimum 3 to 4 weeks, assuming we fall into the right timeline and it doesn't need board approval. On this project of this caliber, we believe internally with their architectural review committee, the high profile nature of it, and in conjunction with the First Americans Museum, that we can handle that internally and still provide the exact product that both that we're showing, but that the city expected this development to be.
Now, see, I view it differently because we can agree that the applicant may have the best of intentions, but the argument you just made is that their motivation is time and money, and this board's motivation is design quality and return for the city. And if those two motivations are at odds with one another, then the point of the SRODD and the Riverfront Design Committee is to ensure that the regulations and guidelines of SRODD are met. And so I think that having this parcel remain in the SRODD allows everybody, the client, the city, adjacent property owners, this committee, to feel a level of confidence and surety that all the regulations which the city has set forth as being important for guaranteeing the investment in the city, or in the river, are met now and in the future, no matter what future development or future occurrences may happen.
So I will note that in removing this, it is not removing the planning director's ability to still review the project. Within the PUD, we have language that has previously been used in a similar Bricktown SPUD, where at building permit stage, the planning director is reviewing this phase for compliance with the images and the regulations contained within the PUD. Second, the future phases are still going to be reviewed by staff through a specific plan application with the same level of detail that's been provided in this application. So the city is not being removed entirely from the process.
So section 59 of the city code, the appropriate use of PUD and SPUD, states that the PUD and SPUD are design and planning tools that are not to be used to circumvent policies or used in lieu of seeking variances to regulations. And it also says that where rezoning is proposed within a special design district or design overlay district, the PUD or SPUD should, 1, incorporate the development regulations and design and guidelines of the design district, and be subject to the design review process for the design district. Basically, the regulations that this committee is based on and the reason this committee exists, your application is saying is not important or is not applicable or shouldn't happen.
You know, I think we would slightly disagree with that. Another project that was similar to this, I guess I'll back up. There are some projects that I think are deserved to be looked at slightly differently. A recent example of this was the Homeland on 36th and Classen. 36th and Lincoln. First grocery store in Northeast Oklahoma City that was a new build in decades. There was a Lincoln Boulevard overlay, same process, same guidelines. For that particular project, it was ultimately rezoned out of the overlay for very similar reasons that we're seeking. So we believe this process has been used in the past, and it is not a misuse of the PUD or SPUD process.
And I agree that certain projects require to be looked at differently, which is why we're here. Each project can come before us for individual consideration. The issue I take is that this whole parcel, this entire development, is being asked to be given a blank check, a blank slate that doesn't have this city's guidelines over it. It has its own guidelines. And while the guidelines, for the most part, that we've seen are promising, and I know your body of work, we've seen it done in the past very well. The issue is not trust or a track record. The issue is precedent. And this committee exists to enforce the Scenic River Overlay Design District recommendations, and we don't want to set a precedent that a large parcel, particularly a very important parcel, can be removed to follow its own rules. We certainly understand, and it's been done in the past even by your office with the Boathouse District, that some parcels can come in, some entire districts can come in and set their own thresholds to be negotiated with the city staff. That's understandable, that's acceptable. What, in my judgment, is less acceptable is entirely removing it from the district, because then it's a wholesale, disregard's not the right word, a wholesale removal of applicability of an entire set of regulations. If we want to discuss or negotiate individual regulations such as parking, fencing, landscaping, building massing, even review thresholds, that can be done. But I take issue with removing the parcel entirely from the design district.
Understood. And I think at this point, our intent is still to move forward with the removal of this tract of land from the district. But if there is feedback, specific regulations that you want to see incorporated into the PUD, that is why we're here. So if there's anything that we can add into the PUD that gives you more assurance that this project will be built similarly to what we've shown, we are happy to include those within the document.
I think that's kind of getting to the heart of my issue. If there's no problem with incorporating any of the regulations of the SRODD, then why does it need to be removed from the SRODD?
It is truly a timing issue with the project of this size, with this much work that has gone into it. It's every piece of this project, from cabana structures to plazas to signage to windows, all of that, any slight change means re-review of a project. And that is not something that this project can afford to go through.
Which is potentially a month delay?
Per item, per building.
Sure, understood. I think that maybe this conversation could have been had months ago. I think that what you're proposing is not a temporary or short-term development, and certainly the city's investment in the river is not a short-term timeline. If this is a very long-term timeline, you're creating a district that will hopefully, I'll say it again, I'm personally very excited to see what you're proposing go forward, as long as it remains in the SRODD. If this district even outlives the buildings that are within it, it's going to be decades and decades and decades, and I don't think that it's within the long-term best interest of the city to throw aside the SRODD guidelines for potentially a month here and there of review time, when this board was established under the assumption that that review and oversight is critically important to the success of the river's development.
Your point is understood.
Committee, I've monopolized our conversation so far. For that, I apologize. Are there any other comments from other committee members?
This is Montoya with regards to timeline. Is there a proposed timeline?
I'm sorry?
I think you had mentioned the timeline and the impacts on that timeline. Is there, in kind of getting into months, like, can I get more information on
Sure.
what the entire timeline looks
So
like?
currently, we're the keeper of the schedule until we turn it over to the contractor, which has already been selected. So currently, we've got a tentative groundbreaking for March 1st with a completion date. The long time frame is the hotel at 24 months. The other buildings can be built within that 24-month window, and they'll go up at different times. The parking structure and the hotel will begin first. The indoor water park and the, lack of better words, convention center or meeting center will go second. The lagoon will go third, and then the RD&E will go last. It'll only take about 12 to 15 months to build that. All of the public infrastructure has to start very soon. Dirt work will probably start before March 1st, just to get the pads ready for a March 1st kickoff. So that's their time frame, and they have an investment team that they've put together to do, this is a big project. Once you make promises, and I respect the the 30-day issue, but if you multiply 30 days times, in a project like this could be 50 to 100 different changes. If I move a light pole, I've got to ask for help. If I change a light fixture, because there are very artistic light fixtures in this project, I'll have to come back. And those 30 days will add up, and I respect that, and you know the industry as well as anybody, that everything's on a timetable. And so that's our timetable as it is today. Funding's in place, and they're ready to start. To your point about why we were here sooner, we could not make any kind of public application until the tribe and their funding sources had approved everything. That was July. And so we've worked about as fast as we could possibly do to get a document like this before the staff for their review to get you to this point.
Katie, just a clarification question. Are any items of the nature that Mr. Johnson mentioned, light poles, et cetera, able to be administratively approved?
There are many, many things within Scenic River that can be done as an administrative amendment to a certificate of approval. And I think, as you noted, that's something that we've also modified in other rezonings where we've changed those thresholds for review to say, even though the threshold for something requiring an administrative amendment or something requiring committee review generally in the district is this, for this project, because we have this level of confidence in what's being constructed or because it's been reviewed in such a cohesive manner, we're going to raise those thresholds, and certain things could even be considered not to require review at all, kind of under that ordinary maintenance and repair threshold. And you could also change those thresholds for what has to go to committee. But it's hard to say what would and what wouldn't. I would think switching out a light fixture, as long as it still meets the guidelines and regulations, would be something that staff could sign off on, though, that kind of thing.
And the staff sign-off, just for clarification, is still an application that, depending on what day of the week you're in, depends on which batch you fall into and when your approval is. And then there is a 10-day appeal period after that is a non-negotiable appeal period that will put a hold on any building permit until that hold is released. So I think, to Tim's point, whether it's plaza or materials or light fixtures or whatever the threshold would have been, it's still an administrative delay for administrative review.
Do we have any other comments or questions from other committee members? In that case, I would entertain a motion. I'm sorry? Oh, thank you. Are there any other comments from audience members or citizens present? Thank you. No? In that case, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval of this application to the Planning Commission on the basis that the project complies with the intent of the Scenic River Overlay Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the following condition: that the PUD shall incorporate the necessary wording to reflect that the PUD shall be left in the SRODD and shall comply with all regulations and guidelines of the SRODD. The master design statement will be required to be revised to incorporate this wording as directed by and approved by staff. And our intent is to keep this in the SRODD in order to review the proposed uses, in order to review proposed building architecture, in order to review parking, in order to review landscaping, in order to review fencing requirements, and in order to review signage and lighting. That motion has not been made. Would anyone like to make that motion or another motion? Chair will entertain any motion, action on this agenda item. chair is not permitted to make a motion. Another committee member must make the motion.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the motion, or sorry, the proposed, can I have the, sorry, can I review it one more time? I need to go to.
Mark, did you have something to add?
We were just going to note that if there's not a motion willing to be made, we would ask that we move on to Planning Commission without a recommendation from this board.
Understood. Thank you.
It sounded like Committee Member Montoya was speaking.
Committee Member Montoya, in answer to your question, the recommendation, or rather the motion that I would entertain, is to provide a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission on the basis that the project complies with the intent of the Scenic River Overlay Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in sections C and D of the staff report, with the following condition: that the PUD shall incorporate the necessary wording to reflect that the PUD shall be left in the SRODD and shall comply with all regulations and guidelines of the SRODD. The master design statement will be required to be revised to incorporate this wording as directed by and approved by staff. And our intent is to leave this parcel in the SRODD in order to review proposed uses, in order to review proposed building architecture, in order to review parking, in order to review landscaping and fencing requirements, and in order to review signage and lighting. I would entertain that or any other motion. If you would like to make that motion, you're welcome to say so moved, or you may make any other motion you'd like.
I would like to make that motion. Montoya.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And we'll need a voice vote for Committee Member Herrera, and Committee Member Templeton has abstained.
Committee Member Herrera, yay.
The motion passes. All 5 present committee members have voted yay, and 1 committee member has abstained. Thank you. Thank you both.
Dana.
Agenda item number 7B, elect chair. Are there any nominations for the chairman of this committee?
This is Jonathan. I'd like to nominate John Postic to continue as chair.
Second.
Thank you both. I accept.
Yep, so we do need a vote on that officially.
That was moved by Heisel and seconded by Templeton.
Councilmember Herrera, yes, yay.
The motion passes. Thank you all. Agenda item number 7C, elect vice chair. I will open for nominations. I would certainly entertain a motion to nominate Councilmember Heisel to continue in his role.
I would like to make a motion to nominate Councilman Heisel as.
Thank you.
This is Ricardo Montoya. I second.
Moved by Templeton, seconded by Montoya.
Committee Member Herrera, yay.
The motion passes. Agenda item number 8A, Administrative Approval Report. Katie, anything to add?
Nope, nothing to note. You all are always welcome to contact staff if you have questions about things that you see on that administrative approval list, but nothing of interest.
Thank you. Item number 8B, comments from Planning Department staff.
So as of right now, it looks like we will not have a January meeting, so you all might get a little break. We'll confirm that officially when we post the notice of cancellation for the meeting, but right now we don't have any cases or other items for the committee to review for that meeting. We also we'll be sending out a save the date for a commission committee training on February 4th. We'll do it as kind of a half day in the morning, that's a Friday. This is something that we've done for several years. We skipped recently with COVID, but it's a time that we get together all of our different design review commissions and committees. We usually include Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment as well, to kind of all learn from each other, talk about best practices, new things that are going on for the city. So it's usually a really nice event, and we appreciate everyone's attendance.
Is the date set?
February 4th.
February 4th.
Thank you, Katie. Item number 8C, comments from committee members. I'd like to start by saying it's been a pleasure serving as your chair for a year, and certainly enjoy my time on this committee and working with each of you, and eager to do it for another year. And we miss Laura today, but Katie, thank you so much for filling in.
Sure.
You're welcome.
And welcome to Erica Herrera. It's a pleasure to have you on our committee.
I'd also like to make a comment. I would like to thank Chair Postic for his thorough reviews and keeping everything going during our meetings. And I think he's done an excellent job and needs to be commended. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Second that.
Item number 8D, next meeting date, as Katie mentioned, is scheduled for Thursday, January 6th, but at this time it appears it will not happen. And with that, we will adjourn. Have a good day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Someone else's.